We are talking with John Paul, the former Michigan coach, who is now the brand new coach in the Premier Lacrosse League. Also a member of the Michigan High School Lacrosse Coaches Association, Hall of Fame, when we're talking a little bit about conversations with history. First of all, thank you for sitting down and conversing with us.
Thank you, Greg.
Congratulations on the new job.
Thank you.
And that's quite a deal from everything I understand.
It really is. I mean, if you, given my start, which I'm sure we'll talk about, if you would have told me that I would ever be in any kind of lacrosse Hall of Fame or have the opportunity to coach professionally, I would have told you you're crazy. This certainly isn't the path I saw my life taking, but incredibly honored to have the opportunity and blessed to have gotten so much from this great sport of ours.
Talk briefly about PLL, because that's a Paul Rabel dream of some sort, and you're kind of a traveling, I don't want to call it traveling circus, but
in some ways, yeah. So Paul reached out to me in August. I had heard whispers about a new pro league, but it had no details. I didn't know he was involved, and had kind of let it go in one ear and out the other. And he reached out in August asking if I'd be interested, and I signed a non-disclosure agreement, which is, they've done a really good job keeping information tight and releasing on the schedule they want to release. And so I knew this was probably something I was going to do in September or so, and then we announced in December. But it was, I think from his perspective, it really came from what he saw as an opportunity to keep the sport moving forward. And he felt like current professional opportunities hadn't really done that. And he really wants to see the sport, especially while he still has an opportunity to play, take this giant leap forward. He has a brother who's really good at building businesses. He's an entrepreneur and a venture capitalist in Silicon Valley, and together they saw an opportunity to partner and get this going. And they also didn't intend to start a new league. Kind of like my career, I didn't intend to be where I am. They just wanted to come to the current league with a bunch of ideas and say, let's work together to make this better. That didn't end up working out, and they made the decision, which takes a lot of guts, to pull the trigger and start a new league themselves. Here we are.
AFL football of sorts, if you will, to some
Really?
extent. I mean, it's that kind of approach.
It really is. It's funny. It's funny you mentioned that. And my wife has a cousin who's married to a professional bass fisherman, and believe it or not, the professional bass tour has just gone through the same thing, where they've had this long-standing traditional league that has existed forever, and most of the top bass fishermen have split off to form their own league because they weren't completely satisfied with how things were going, and they thought they could do a better job. So some parallels there too. I
think of how expensive sports are. Adrian College now has a bass fishing scholarship program.
All right.
And if you've got to go out and spend $75,000 for a couple of boats each, that you can buy an awful lot of lacrosse sticks from that standpoint.
No question.
You've called yourself in a number of times of sort of a non-traditional. So maybe if we could start at the beginning. Kind of start maybe, I know you went to Pioneer High School.
I did.
Maybe just give us a little background.
Yeah, I graduated in '84 from Pioneer High School. Pioneer did not have lacrosse when I was there, so I didn't start playing until college. But I knew about the sport. I grew up with Bob DiGiovanni's sons. Bob was the longtime 33-year player and then coach at Michigan. And I grew up with his sons. I had a stick in my hand a little bit, just throwing around at the park with those guys. And we tried to get the sport organized and going at Pioneer when I was there in the early 80s, and we had enough interest and support, but the school board wouldn't let us at the time. So it was always kind of an itch, and knew I wanted to try it in college. Albion ended up being, I thought at the time, a good fit for me academically, and they had a club team that I could start playing for, so that's where I ended up.
Organization seems to be sort of a thread through a number of things in your life, both at Michigan, obviously trying to get it going at Pioneer. If you weren't a lacrosse coach at this point, where would your life have taken you?
Who knows? I mean, I
teacher?
I don't think so. I ended up, after trying several majors in college. College was a long, tortuous path for me until I finally figured some things out. But I ended up getting a degree in history, and like everybody by then it was the early '90s. Getting degrees in history and political science or any of the liberal arts, thought I was going to law school. Law school was back then was the business school of today. Right. So that's what I was going to do. I was all set to go to law school. I actually had applied a bunch of places, was accepted a couple places, and the last minute realized that I was doing that because that's what I thought I was supposed to do instead of what I really wanted to do. And started my career in athletic administration. I got my first real job after college in the Michigan Athletic Department in the development office. But at that time, the department was so small, you were really doing a lot of everything. So I was in the fundraising office, which at that time was a very small office with 2-3 people, and but was directly working with the athletic director at the time, Joe Roberson, and just learned a ton about athletic administration. And that's where I thought my career was going to go.
From there, obviously, you played a little bit of lacrosse after Albion. You played for a couple of the pro teams in Detroit.
Well, I played at Michigan, so
Right.
I ended up transferring to Michigan and played at Michigan. Was drafted by the Detroit Turbos in 1990, which also came as a complete shock 5 years after I started playing, and had no idea they even knew who I was. And then, went out. I never got into a game in the pro league, but practiced with them a lot out at the old Square Lake Racket Club where they used to practice.
Right.
And on the cement with the boards that had no glass. So if you got hit into the boards, you flipped right over onto the cement on the other side. And the Gate brothers were part of that. So, had an amazing experience kind of getting to play with some of the best players in the world at a really high level, even if it was just practice situations for a couple years. But meanwhile, was getting my career going in athletic administration and really thought that's the path I was going to take at the time.
The Square Lake facility was sort of a catalyst for all kinds of lacrosse players. It was sort of the first place where, if you weren't playing for high school, one of the 8 or 9 or 10 or 12 high schools being played, there's a ton of kids that came out of the middle 80s to the early 90s that learns the craft there.
Yep.
From all kinds of folks that were coaches. So obviously you were one of those guys.
Yeah, and it was a really interesting atmosphere because, if you know that facility, and I don't know how much it's changed. I haven't been in it in probably 20 years, but all the people
It's
playing.
the same.
Yeah, all right. So everybody playing tennis.
Right.
Bloomfield families playing tennis through most of the facility, and then on the other end,
Move the boards.
and a bunch of Canadian guys coming down from Sarnia and Toronto and Wallaceburg, roughing it up playing lacrosse and using the language they use when they're playing, and it couldn't have been more of a contrast. It was so much fun being around those guys.
Box was not the popular sport then that it is now.
Not in the States. Yeah.
Right. Obviously Canada, I started as a box player because I was a hockey player. That's
Right.
just the way you started. Did you think box in those days was going to lead to anything from a field perspective like it might be now? Or was it just one of those other sports you played?
I think it was just one of those other sports. I was fascinated by it though, and for me, honestly, it was way more fun to play. And I really enjoy watching field lacrosse and coaching field lacrosse, but playing box is a blast. I mean, it's so fast. It comes back to my basketball roots, and you're just getting up and down the court, and it emphasized a lot of the things that I was pretty good at. I was very one-handed as a field lacrosse player. Well, if you ever tried to switch hands with Mito Martinello coaching you, he would blow the whistle and start screaming and yelling all kinds of swear words and telling you you're an idiot and put your stick back in your right hand, and that fit my game perfectly. So, and I liked the physicality of it. It was just so much fun. There's just so much action. You never stop going.
Right.
And I think seeing it grow now in the States is helping to elevate the sport so much. I mean, players' skill levels are so much higher than they were, partly because of stick technology, but partly because a lot of them are exposed to box a lot earlier, and it helps them so much.
When you go to a place like London, and even in those days, and see 6,000 or 7,000 or 8,000 people on a Saturday night and watch a game, then the Detroit Turbos would play, and I don't know what you had for crowds, but they weren't that level, I don't think.
Yeah, sometimes they were.
Were
The
they?
Turbos did okay. Yeah, sometimes they had a lot of giveaways, but yeah, they did. They because it appealed to a lot of the Red Wings fans that couldn't afford
Right.
Red Wings tickets, so a lot of them would come in for those games, and they cross-marketed. The Illiches were involved in the ownership, so they cross-marketed a lot of things, but we did get good crowds there.
So now you've played at Michigan, you're obviously sitting in the fundraising world of the Michigan Athletic Department. What got you to thinking about Michigan lacrosse as a sport, as a coach?
Well,
tell us about that story, I guess.
Yeah, I was sporadically helping Coach DiGiovanni out with the Michigan team while I was doing that. And I was also coaching at Pioneer. So the Pioneer program got started in '89, and I was playing at Michigan at the time for Deej. And Deej started the Pioneer program and brought 3 or 4 of us over to help him start the Pioneer program. So his son Rob, me, Mike Kennedy, Moose Kennedy, Tim Riley, we all went over and helped start this program and coached there. And then once I was done with college, I would come help teach at Michigan as much as I could. So my career's going in athletic administration. I get married in '96, and I think it was that year I switched jobs as well and left athletics and started doing development in the university, on the academic side of the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts, mostly because my salary tripled. Athletics is not a place to start your career if you're looking to make money, no matter what you're doing in athletics.
Right.
And so, went there and gave up coaching because I thought, I got a whole new life. I'm married. I got this new job. I'm going to dedicate myself to all those things. December of '97, a couple of the Michigan players called me up, and Coach DiGiovanni had stepped down as the Michigan coach, and they were looking for somebody to take over. They knew me, of course, because I'd helped out from time to time, and they asked me to take over. And I told them two things. One, I told them that I would do it if I had Deej's blessing, and so I called him to make sure that he was good with me taking over. And two, I'd only do it for a season and I'd be sporadic. I said, you guys, I'll help bail you out for this one season. This was the second year of the MCLA, so things were starting. It wasn't called the MCLA then, but things were starting to get more serious.
What was prior to the MCLA?
It was just we just had a local conference. It was called the Big Ten Lacrosse League.
Okay.
And so I told him I'll help you out for the season. I can't guarantee I'll be there all the time, but you're gonna have to find somebody at the end of that. After the season, you're gonna have to find somebody else permanent. And 20 years later, I'm still the Michigan coach.
So you weren't on the ground level for the starting of the MCLA.
I wasn't. I got there a year later.
Okay.
Yeah.
And obviously you've been as president and from that perspective.
I became the president of the CCLA when we changed our regional conference from the Big Ten Lacrosse League to the Central Collegiate Lacrosse Association. That put me on the board, the MCLA board, I think in my second year. And then 5 years later, I took over for Jason Lamb, who was the first president of the MCLA. At that time, it was still the USL MDIA.
Right.
And then took over and was president for 6 years.
So you start with an idea that you're going to be there for a year with some sporadic opportunity, and how does that mushroom into the giant that it did?
I was doing.
That's not overnight.
I think in two ways. One, it was obvious to me that I was doing something that I loved, and that's always been the way I'm really good at focusing on things I love doing. I'm not so good at focusing on things I don't love doing, and I don't think that's uncommon. But
I think that's true of coaches.
Yeah, but I definitely take that to an extreme. So and I love doing it, and that became apparent, and I dove into it head first, and ended up signing on again for the next year, and was dedicating more and more time to it. And meanwhile, my real job was starting to suffer, and it just came to a point that I had to make a choice. Do one or the other. And I tell people this all the time, the growth of the Michigan program, there are a lot of moments in your life that are kind of forks in the road that could go either way, that lead to whatever path you end up going. And that one was, ultimately, it was my wife, Lisa, allowing me to leave a pretty decent paying job in a great career track, a very safe,
right,
non-stress, great career track.
It's not home on the weekends.
To go volunteer and coach the Michigan lacrosse team. At that time, it was not just volunteer. We were contributing a ton. We were, where there were shortfalls in the team, we were making that up. And so, for her to allow me to do that for 1 year, much less the next 14 as a club team, I think that the program owes as much to her as anybody else.
When did you get a vision that this could be a larger entity than what it was? Was there a moment in time?
It kind of crept along, and it's funny, I've never been, so I'm a big vision and goals guy, but that kind of, the way I motivate myself and the way I do things, that's kind of come later in life to me. At that time, I wasn't. I was very much a day-to-day, I'm going to do what's in front of me today and figure out what I got to do for tomorrow, and that's how I ran things. And all I knew is that I was around Michigan athletics my whole life, really. My father was administrator at the university, and then I worked in the athletic department, and I saw how all the varsity teams at Michigan ran. And that was my world. I mean, that was what I was comparing what we were doing to.
Right.
And so, in my mind, I'm thinking, I'm looking at football doing something with their multi-million-dollar budget, and I'm thinking, well, how do we do that? How can we get that support? How can we build that? And that's all piece by piece. That's what I was trying to build up.
If you don't have a start in educational fundraising, does it go as fast as quick?
I don't know. I don't know that it went that fast. I mean, it really crept up, but it was incredibly helpful to have that background. I was very comfortable in one, asking for money, and two, being around the kind of people that have the kind of money that can support programs at the level.
Not only just the actual dollars, but the process of it.
Yeah, exactly. And so, that comfort level and expertise that I learned from doing it for 5 or 6 years certainly helped pay off for the program. Yeah.
First national championship was what year?
2008.
Okay, so
Yeah.
it took a while, 7, 8 years.
Took 10 years for us to get to that point, and the year before, our first year we didn't make the MCLA tournament. Our second year we did, and then made it every year from then on. And we became this team. I think 7 out of 8 years we lost in the quarterfinals, no matter what we were ranked. Sometimes we were ranked 8th or 9th, and sometimes we were ranked 1. We always lost in the quarterfinals. One year we made it to the semis and lost to Santa Barbara, who won it all that year. Lost 4-3. We beat them 4-3 during the season, their only loss of the season. And so, but we this team that always loses in the quarters, we were kind of snake bit and had this reputation, which is not one you want. And then in 2007, we were, I think, the 3rd or 2nd seed, and we played Northeastern, who was the 14th or 15th seed, and they beat us like 14-3 in the first round. And I mean, they smoked us. And it was one of the most miserable feelings I've ever had as a coach, because and it wasn't just that we got beat badly that day, it was that we really felt like the program had taken a step back and we weren't where we needed to be. That game was a symptom of kind of where the program was that year. And so, we came out of that year thinking, well, I might be done with this, or we're going to have to take a major step forward. And remember, deciding that we were going to take a major step forward and we were going to make some pretty enormous culture changes to the program, and bringing in Bobby Morales, a Brother Rice grad who was now a senior captain for us, and having a conversation with him in my kitchen the time before, in the end of the summer, and saying, all right, we're going to change all this stuff. We're going to make it much tougher to be part of the team. We might lose half the team, and saying, if we're going to do all this as a senior, you're going to have to suck this up, you and your class, and we might go 500 because we're going to lose so many guys. And then, but your class is going to help us move the culture forward. And Bobby said, no, if you do that, we'll win a national championship.
Wow.
Right.
Well, but I guess the point too is that the sort of change in process was after a lot of failure.
Yes, and which is the great teacher for all of us, right? And so, and that's exactly what happened there. And there was that decision point of, am I going to take this and learn from it and really try and change, or am I going to just cruise along, or am I going to quit? And we decided to get after it. And that didn't start. That was a rocky path as well that year, because you're losing guys left and right. They're quitting. It was a neat year though. That was the year. I don't know if you remember this, but in the fall, we hosted Johns Hopkins and Army here, right? And so, I again, very fortunate.
With Paul Rabel.
With Paul Rabel. Paul was a senior on that team.
And Dave Petramala.
Yeah, Petro was the coach, and it was, Petro called me up and said, hey, what do you think about us in Army coming out and scrimmaging you in Ann Arbor? We had always scrimmaged varsity teams. We never scrimmaged club teams. We always scrimmaged varsity teams. Ohio State, Bellarmine, Robert Morris, a lot of the D3 teams in Ohio. And to me, it made sense for us to elevate our game to play teams that were better than us, and I didn't want to scrimmage teams that we were going to see during the season. So, we were always really fortunate to have all those opportunities. So that was fairly natural, but to have Hopkins and Army come to Ann Arbor when we were a club team.
Did Nike play any part in their
No.
game? Because there's some conventional thinking that was
No,
Nike.
had nothing to do with it.
Okay.
It was just those coaches saying, hey, let's get out to the Midwest. I mean, for recruiting purposes, we all knew each other.
Right.
And they you know, they saw it as an opportunity to get out to our region and help the sport grow, which you know, doesn't happen enough, to be honest with you. People thinking that way. And
you were aware there's all kinds of urban legends about how that was set up.
And it's funny because there's urban legends about everything,
right?
Right, in 90% of urban.
Right. Well, that's why the series is so cool, because we're displaying all kinds of things that aren't true.
There was nothing to it.
Okay.
It was literally those guys wanting to come to the Midwest and just, you know, calling me up and saying, hey, can we do this in Ann Arbor and we'll scrimmage you too. And
Joe Bracey was the Army coach.
Yeah,
at the time.
Joe was the coach at Army at the time. And
what did they, other than growing the sport? What I guess that's their entire motivation, right?
Yeah, and I think too.
Plus, you got into a Michigan football game, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they
correct?
went to a Michigan football game,
which is a nice
so their guys could spend that weekend and
great trip for them.
A great trip for them, and you know, we continued to do that as a varsity program. We would have teams come in the fall and scrimmage us and have them go to a football game.
Right.
And we always invited teams that didn't have big time football at their
Right.
schools so they could have that experience. But it was, you know, you said before we started this chat, lacrosse is a small world and we all know each other. And I think so part of it was them wanting to get out of here, part of it was out here, part of it was them knowing me and being comfortable that we were going to give them an experience that felt legit, you know, and wasn't going to feel like a club experience to them. And we did. And one of the really neat things about that weekend too was, you know, we were administered by our club sports department, not our athletic department. And our director of rec sports was a guy named Bill Canning at the time. And when I brought this to Bill and said, look, we have this opportunity, he got it. And he absolutely ran with it. And we, you know, they brought all these bleachers into Elbel Field where we did it, and they put it off limits to people for the first time ever. Nobody was allowed to touch it for months while they got the field ready. And,
I was there.
Yeah, and it's, you know, we had several thousand paying people at this game. And
we had more than that. I think
we had 3,000 or 4,000, I think.
A lot of bodies.
Yeah, a lot of bodies. And
for temporary seating.
No doubt. Yeah, no doubt. And that seating's still there. That seating is there because of that game that we played that year. And but it was really just the way the lacrosse world works a lot of times. There was no Nike involvement. There was no other motives to it. It was just, let's go play in the Midwest. Where can we play? Hey, JP's got a good program going. Why don't we do it out there?
I think one of the reasons I'm asking the question is sometimes there's urban myth. In those days, it was, well, club teams could play with varsity teams, and there was always the scuttlebutt back and forth. And it was just, in this case, it was somebody picked up a phone call and made a phone call.
That was it. Yeah, and it wasn't about who could play with who. And I mean, you know, we couldn't compete with those guys even then. And that 2008 team, you know, we were very successful for the next 4 years in a row. We were 76-2 over 4 years and won 3 championships. That was our best team, that 2008 team. And but you know, we weren't. And Rabel, by the way, scored the first goal of the scrimmage on a right to left split that he buried lower right corner, which was kind of his trademark move back then. And you know, told our guys this is what he's going to do the first move. That's what he did. Scored.
You kind of knew he was a player.
Yeah.
Your experience within the university sounds like maybe there's a lot of not copying, but at least looking at what Michigan athletic department looked like. And when you make this culture change, from a structural standpoint, did you kind of take on that sort of NCAA model?
In many ways, we did. Yeah, I mean, we just upped the accountability level, and at the same time, we were recruiting. We were actively recruiting at the time. We didn't have a lot of pull at admissions, but we were going out and spending the summers on the road and making sure people knew about Michigan and trying to draw the right kinds of kids here. And part of that too, and I tell young coaches this all the time, part of that was recruiting wealth. I mean, we wanted some families that could help us get to where we wanted to be, and we had those at that point that could give, you know, 6-figure and 7-figure gifts if they needed to without really feeling it. And you know, by our last couple years as a club team, we were $1 million a year budget and about to build a $10 million facility for the club program.
If you don't attack it that way, a conscious choice, is it a different program?
Completely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And
it's Michigan State.
And we don't have varsity lacrosse right now at Michigan.
Right.
Absolutely. That was all, you know, part of that. And none of that, by the way, was intended to lead to varsity lacrosse. That was never the intention. It was, I saw the athletic director at that time was Bill Martin. I coached Bill's son Mike at Pioneer, know the Martins well, and knew that Bill had zero interest in adding sports, zero. So
Nobody
as,
does.
as nobody does, right? And that's
It's more responsibility.
I talk about that all the time,
Right.
about how, there is almost zero motivation for, especially big time football schools, to add men's lacrosse. So anyway, that was the atmosphere we were in. I never expected it to happen. So I wanted to build a program that was sustainable as an elite level program without being varsity, because that's what I saw on our horizon. And the model I was using was Cal Rugby. Cal had built a program that had their own multi-million-dollar facility.
Even
had
from a marketing
scholarships,
standpoint, they were selling shirts and jackets and all kinds of
but
stuff.
they had a multi-million-dollar endowment. I mean, they had built this fortress that was sustainable on its own, and that's what I wanted to do. So, the next steps for us, we had secured sponsorships and had this big budget and had full-time staff. We had a full-time director of ops and full-time coaches. But the next step was building this facility that we were literally about to break ground on.
In the same place it is now?
No,
Nope.
it was right next to Bell Field.
Okay.
There's an old radio supply place owned by a guy named Martin Vluitt here in town, and we had come into a purchase agreement with him on that space, and we had architect's plans. There was stuff on the internet, like fly through cool graphics of what it was going to look like, and we were literally about to break ground when Dave Brandon decided that we were going to have varsity lacrosse. So, and then the next step would have been to build the endowment, and at whatever point I left the program, that was my intention, was to have one that was untouchable. It was just self-sustainable forever.
What's the best part of, what was some of your better moments with the club program?
There are so many of them, and for different reasons. When I first started coaching the program, I was 29 years old, and the guys were 20, 21, 22, and I went out with them. We had a blast. We had a great time together. And some of those guys now are some of my best friends, right? They're like teammates,
Right.
as much as they are like guys I coached. We talked about, I used to do a lot of mountaineering, and one of my climbing partners, guy Andrew Katz, who was the guy who called me to say, come coach the team. Just having that atmosphere was really fun. I'll tell you one. The night we won our first national championship, we were in Dallas, Texas. We had won in Texas Stadium, the old Texas Stadium. I'm a lifelong Cowboys fan, so that was pretty special.
One of the first events in that stadium.
No, it was the old Texas Stadium.
Oh, okay.
Which was falling apart at the time.
Did you at one point play in the new stadium?
No, we didn't.
Okay.
We played. It then moved to Dick's in Denver. We
Okay.
won our next two in Dick's. But it was this, really special atmosphere. Anyway, we go back to the hotel that we'd been at for like 10 days now. And this hotel kind of embraced us, and we did things right. I mean, we did all our meals at the hotel catered, and we had meetings, and we did it like a varsity team would. And all the parents were staying there. It was this big, and it had this huge multi-level atrium area. And we come back on our bus, and the hotel staff is waiting for us, and the parents and everybody else to congratulate us. It's nighttime, and we go in, and the parents had set up an open bar in the lobby area for us, right? And the intention was, let's all have a great time together. The guys won't go out. We'll keep everybody right here. The hotel had brought in a police officer to allow us to do this and just keep an eye on everything to make sure it didn't go poorly. We got guys
Sure.
from 18 to 22,
Sure,
right?
sure.
And that atmosphere of just, all right, we're protected. We're just going to have, this great time together, and everybody supporting us in that. That was one of my favorite moments. Just everybody just kind of, there's a sense of relief when you win a championship as much as there is celebration, but just this sense of us all saying, all right, we got this done, now let's all just relax and celebrate together. And as a coach, I didn't have to worry about, because we had a police officer guarding the door. Our guys were going to go out and create any trouble. It was just everybody hanging out and having a great time and kind of basking in, all right, we did it.
You were involved a lot in the MCLA management of the process. You were president and were instrumental in all kinds of things. One of those things was leaving USL.
Yep.
Which was at the time not.
We were the first major group to leave them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was that something that you look back on? Was that a good choice?
It was. Yeah, it was. And I say that as a former USL board member, and somebody who's been on other USL, boards, the Coaches Council, and some other stuff with them, and still close with a lot of USL people, Steve Stenerson included, and And that was a tough call. I remember having to call Jody Martin as the president of the MCLA and saying we're out. And it was really because we felt like we were losing control of our own growth, right? We were tied into the women's championship at the time, which was fine, and I'm really glad we were able to help them grow into what they were at the time. But USL had control of our funding and our budget, and we just felt stifled with what we could do as an organization, and that's why we did it. And ultimately, I think the organization has grown leaps and bounds since we did that, and since I left and Tony Scuzzero took over, and now Ken Loving.
And I think it's one of the strongest club programs of any sport at the university level in the country. With what they do and how they approach it. I was just curious from that standpoint. So you had this great success at Michigan. Somewhere along the line, somebody walks and knocks on the door and says, listen, we'd like to take a right-hand turn here. In this case, David Brandon. David says, how did that all come about?
Well, obviously we knew that an athletic director change was coming. When Bill Martin said that he was going to step down, we had no idea who the next AD was going to be. And we thought, again, our goal wasn't to have varsity lacrosse, but we thought, why not at least throw a proposal together and see what happens? So we did. One of my former players, who was a senior on that 2008 championship team, a guy named Peter Krause, actually put the proposal together. He was working in consulting at the time in Chicago, and he put a really, really great proposal together. And it took several months to do it, all this time while we didn't know who the next AD was going to be. And then when Dave became the AD, we were ready with this proposal. And so I set up a meeting with him, and a couple things happened right away. One, he took the meeting, which was...
You were happy with that?
Yeah, and I didn't know Dave other than to say hello to him.
Right.
And two, he took it pretty quickly. Like he had only been on the job 2 or 3 weeks. I don't think he'd even met individually with all his head coaches yet. So, I went in actually feeling a little bit curious about why this meeting was happening so quickly, and gave him the proposal, and he leafed through it, and he literally tossed it over his shoulder and said, I already want to do this. I said, that was easy. And he said, I don't know if I can, right? Which is
different answer.
Yes, but I know that I want to. And he had no background in lacrosse. All he knew is, as a businessman, he had seen the sport growing. He had noticed growth. And so he said, you're gonna have to give me time. Might be 6 months, might be 9 months, might be a year, but I gotta figure out if I can do this, and if I can, we're going to. So I was like, okay. He's like, don't bug me.
Right.
I'll figure it out and let you know. And so, he would
say that, though.
Yeah, and so he gave the project to Mike Stevenson, who was a longtime administrator in the department, and it was really Mike's last major project for the department, was to figure out all the parameters for the varsity sport, if it could be done. They found, to Peter Krause's credit, that when they put all the numbers together, that everything budget-wise and procedurally was incredibly close to the proposal that we put together.
Is there a number that a university has to look at?
No, I mean, because there's so many variables to how you
Because you've heard everything from $3 million to $20 million. Was there ever a
No, I mean, and again, everything is different. We had a very unique situation at Michigan because we're one of 15 athletic departments in the country that makes money. So most don't. Most lose significant money.
Which means endowments that are unbelievable.
Yeah, and so having a budget surplus means that you can do some things. Now that doesn't mean you can add a sport.
Right.
It just means that you're a little bit more flexible than a school that doesn't. So that helps a lot. We have a very driven donor base. So that for some of those reasons, it was a little bit more possible at Michigan. We were already in compliance with Title IX, so the numbers matched up already. So it doesn't mean you could just add men's lacrosse. You'd have to add a women's sport along with it, at least one. But a lot of pieces were in place to make it possible. And then, they just had to figure out if they really could. And as I explain to people all the time, athletic directors don't get to make those kinds of decisions in a vacuum. He doesn't get to just figure all the numbers out and say, oh, I'm going to add a sport.
Board of Regents have to weigh in.
It's the regents, it's admissions, it's the academic side, it's the president, it's some key donors, it's the board and control of athletics, it's the provost. All these people have to sign off. It's yes, and it's a giant tent. And so that was really Dave's job over the next, several months was getting all these people, lobbying all these people to get on board, and they weren't. It took right up until the last minute. There were a couple very key people that were very much against this.
Because?
I think more than anything because of the reputation of our sport, and bluntly, why are we going to add a sport with a bunch of spoiled white rich kids?
Okay.
And who are just going to get in trouble,
right,
and not really add anything to the university that
right,
we don't already have here,
right,
in spades. So,
right.
So, and I get
makes
that.
Sense.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
And that was one of the biggest concerns. And so, but ultimately, we got over that. And he also, from a goodwill perspective, we didn't need it financially, but from a goodwill perspective, he promised to raise $6 million to get the program started for the first couple of years, just to be fiscally responsible and say, look, we got their operating budgets covered for these first couple of years. So that doesn't even start to cover all the expenses that it takes to add a program, facilities and all the peripheral staff and everybody else. But it was kind of a good faith. We're going to raise some money to do this too.
When did you know? Who told you? When did you know that all of this work that you've worked for 15 years?
I was talking to Dave off and on. He would call with questions and update me on things every once in a while. But ultimately, he called me in and said, we've gone through this whole study and we know we can do it. He still had some steps to go through to get political support, but and then informed me we're going to have to raise $6 million. And so, if that takes 5 months, we'll do it. We'll announce then. If it takes 3 years, it's going to be in 3 years. Let's see what we're going to do.
Was it always implied you were going to be the coach?
No, and I knew from the start, and I told Dave that I knew I could be lobbying myself out of a job. I honestly, when we first went through this, didn't assume that I would be the coach because, it's Michigan. There'd be a lot of really, really experienced, qualified people who would love that job. But Dave, I don't remember at what point, but at some point, he, on a phone call we were on, and when you're dealing with Dave Brandon, a lot of those phone calls are like midnight. He's always up late working. So, but at some call, he was like, "Oh, you're going to be the coach," and it just came out kind of out of nowhere, and I said, "All right, let's move on to the next thing." So
yeah, but inside there had to be.
Sure, yeah, sure, there was some of that. I remember, before I knew that, talking to Tony Seaman one time, and Tony just being like, "Man, they got to make you the coach." And I said, I don't know what's going to end up happening. He said, "That'd be such a kick in the balls if they didn't make you the coach." But it was not necessarily an assumption of mine, no.
If you didn't win 3 club championships and you still had the same financial base, the same organizational base, would this be a different question?
I don't know. I have no idea. I mean, I think that, having the success we had as a club program certainly, gave me some credibility in what I could do.
It also helped that loyalty was a good part of that process.
Sure.
You'd been loyal to the program, you'd done all the work.
Sure. And I think that's, Dave,
not to suggest you're not a good coach, that wasn't my point. You're a phenomenal coach.
You were talking about rumors and stuff too. There were all these rumors that went around too when I was hired or before I was hired about people he was interviewing and people he brought in secretly to interview for the position.
None of it was true.
He didn't interview a single person.
I know that.
Yeah, and he and because I went to him a couple times saying, a lot of people are saying this or this, and Petro was actually one of the guys who was rumored at one point to come in, and I knew that wasn't true because I was so tied into the athletic department and everybody there. There's no way somebody could have come in secretly.
Right.
I would have known.
Right.
But also, what Dave did is it's a state university. And by law, if you have a job opening at a state university, you have to post the job publicly. He bypassed that. He got that waived for this job. That coaching job was never posted. And he did that because he knew who he wanted the coach to be.
One of the cool parts of this series is the myths that we are dispelling.
Right.
And I think part of the rumor mill is that you have a Michigan State program that had some success, that falls by the wayside, not that much longer away from that. We have finally back, a Division I team that, as the sport is growing, and obviously the stewardship that you provided was valuable, and he obviously trusted that. And away you go. I know you downplayed when you were told that the job was yours, but inside your brain had to be just going through the roof.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Absolutely. I mean, it was exciting. I didn't know what I was getting into, but it was exciting.
Who was the first person you told?
My wife, I'm
Yeah.
sure. Yeah, I'm sure I got out of the office and called her right away.
Yeah. So now you've got this choice to make. You're obviously going to be the coach.
We had to raise some money too. That's what we were doing the next few months. And we raised that $6 million in about 4 months. And that was part of the, we had a donor base ready, not just our alums,
Right.
but also some parents that were ready to kick in.
Which is a
right
decision you
away.
made, 10 years previous.
And I remember that year, that 2008 season, the week we were going to play BYU at home. It might have been BYU, might have been CSU, but a big game. We had a big game that week. I think it was CSU, and I had to go on a fundraising trip with Joe Parker, who's now the athletic director at Colorado State, who was the head of development for athletics at the time, and we had to go to New York City to fundraise. And so I had to miss 2 days of practice, 3 days of practice to go fundraise for the varsity team.
Right.
With the head of development in athletics, and we were in the city for a day and a half and had 20 appointments with mostly Michigan lacrosse alums, going from office to office to office in Midtown and all these trading floors and everywhere else, asking people for money. And but we had a pretty good sense that we were going to get there pretty quickly because people were so fired up about this.
So you're now doing the administrative work. Do you think about the same sort of model going into a varsity NCAA program that you were running in the club? Is it sort of the same model?
In many ways it is. When I officially signed the contract to be the coach,
Because you had a year, am I correct, to get the team on the field?
no, we had no time whatsoever.
Okay.
Which was unique about the way we did it at Michigan, and it's something that I was torn about this in many ways. I wanted us to have time to build up before we started playing a varsity schedule for a number of reasons. But we ended up not doing that. We ended up going right. We announced in May, late May of 2012, and we're varsity that fall. So we went into that first year without a single varsity recruit.
Prior to that decision, were you sort of laying some of the groundwork to thinking you're going to make that right-hand turn?
No.
Okay.
Not really. I mean, a little
So
bit,
you just jumped
right?
away
We
with
jumped
that?
right in. I
Okay.
wasn't allowed to recruit as a varsity coach. They made that very clear to me. I wasn't allowed to talk to potential assistant coaches until I had signed a contract. I couldn't do anything on behalf of the athletic department. So,
Wow.
so we literally went in with our club team, and that's very different compared to Marquette, for example, or some of these programs. Marquette had 2 years with their full staff there to recruit. They had 1 year with their freshman class there and
Right.
transfers
Well, even
there.
Dave Kyle was an advisor.
Yeah, Dave Cottle's an advisor. They had 2 year build up. Our women's program had a 2 year build up before they got going. We didn't. We went right in. And so from a positive perspective, I think that allowed us in an easier way to carry our club history along with us. Because I was the coach and because we morphed right into this varsity program, this really proud club history we have here, all these alums who are pretty tied into the program were able to come right along and feel like they're part of it. Dave even talks sometimes about giving all those guys a letter just to make them really feel like they were part of it. And that was important to him. He got the development side of it and the friendship side of it and getting these guys all part of the family. From a program building perspective, it was really tough, right? Because we're now playing a varsity schedule and asking for a varsity commitment from an entire team of guys that didn't come to Michigan to be varsity athletes, who the varsity athletes at Michigan were not really accepting as varsity athletes yet. They were saying, no, you guys are all club guys. You're not really the varsity guys. And it was a tough.
And there's a different group.
It's a different group and a different mindset. And I think in some ways, for Kevin Connery and that staff now, they're still overcoming a little bit of the hangover from that culture change that took a long time to change, for those guys. And it also set us up. We weren't going to be successful. We had a top 20 strength of schedule our first 2 years, but we went 1-13 2 years in a row. And we had a couple close ones, but we're playing Loyola and Maryland and Carolina and Loyola's championship year. And we weren't going to win a lot of those games.
When you win all those games as a club team and now you're 2-26 over 2 years, does that play on the brain at all?
Sure, it grinds on you, and you start to, you're hungry to change that, but at the same time, I think for the players and staff, it's like it becomes this when you don't see significant improvement, it becomes kind of this mindset of every time something starts going poorly, it's like, here we go again.
But by year 2, you were doing a really good job nationally of pulling in some really good players.
We were, and but it really took
from
us.
Traditional
it really took
hotbeds.
us. Yes, but it took us. It took us 3 or 4 years to really figure out how to recruit elite players to Michigan. We got a couple late bloomer guys, and this was back when recruiting was still happening later when we first started.
Right.
That changed. Well, by my last year, we had 2 8th graders committed.
Right.
So it changed dramatically. Now, fortunately, it's changed back.
Right.
But yeah, those 2 8th graders are absolute studs, though.
Right. No, I'm sure they would be, but
Yeah, they still
it just
are.
doesn't make sense to put a target on an 8th grader's
No.
back. But
No question. We all hated that. But yes, so we got some really good late bloomers or guys who had been overlooked a little bit, like a Kyle Jackson or Mikey Schlosser, or Gerald Logan. Some of those guys, Brad Lott. Some of those guys that really helped us. Chase Brown. Chase Brown from Annapolis, Maryland, was our very first varsity commit, and he was playing for Severn School for Brian Wood. Brian Wood was the 4-time All-American at Hopkins, who was just a couple years older than me. And when I was a college player, Brian Wood was who I wanted to be, right? And so here I am recruiting. I actually recruited Brian's son too,
Right.
And Chase came on that same visit, and Chase ended up being our first commit to the program and was a really good player for us.
But you did a great job of recruiting in Denver, San Diego, for example.
We did, yeah. We went west. We were one of the first programs to really focus on the West, and I think we did a really good job of recruiting where we were. But it really wasn't until the 2017 class, who are sophomores now, and unfortunately I never got to coach those guys, but the 17 class was our first elite class, top to bottom elite class. And it was because we figured out what we needed to do to put together really, really great top to bottom classes at Michigan. We hadn't figured that out until then.
It appears that you chose to go national recruiting rather than maybe concentrate on the state. And I say that in concurrence with University of Detroit, which went local rather than going national. Was that a conscious choice?
We were trying to win in the ECAC at the time when we first started, and then the Big Ten. And
Different player.
It really is. And so we had to, one, Michigan is a very national school. We're 50% out-of-state students
Right.
at Michigan, which is unheard of for a public university. But two, we knew, we had to recruit nationally to be able to put ourselves in a position to compete nationally. And we weren't going to get a lot of the, really, really top Baltimore and Long Island kids, because they're also tied into top Baltimore kids for the most part are going to the Baltimore schools or the ACC. They've always been tied in there. It's starting to change. But we knew that wasn't going to happen for us right away. And it was, when I say we figured it out, Kevin Mack, who's a sophomore on the Michigan team now and is doing great, as I knew he would, was the key to getting our 2017 class started. When I say we figured it out, we put everything into getting Kevin to start that class off. He was regarded as one of the top attackmen in the country. He's from Long Island. He's, and getting him to commit to Michigan kind of opened the floodgates for us and got a lot of other top kids saying, well, if he's going.
In my experience being on a couple of USL subcommittees, I've gotten to meet a lot of folks. I had a chance to meet some folks from Mhslca, and I got invited back. I've heard for years about Long Island attacks, and I didn't understand what it was until I went to Long Island and watched them. And then it made some sense that they were just a little bit different in stick skill and in their process. Part of it is because they pay attention to it there. There's just more offensive coaches than defensive coaches.
Yeah, and they have great defenders there too, but Kevin was part of the Mhslca team, that the attack when, I think his junior year was him, O'Keefe, who's tearing it up for Penn State right now,
Right.
and Cannon at Hopkins. Those were the three attackers.
Right, in high school.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
Bob Dowd made a comment about when we were coming back, he'd come from Central New York to watch before he was hired at Country Day, and the headmaster asked him, what do you think? And he said, he says, if I was going to get a job, my comment was, he says, we would beat you, my Central New York team, we'd beat you 30-0.
Yeah.
He said it didn't deter the interview, but he realized that it was, and we're talking, 25 years ago, from that standpoint. So you're pushing this thing. When do you get sort of an inkling that maybe your tenure at Michigan is going to maybe be terminated?
Well, so the year before my last year, we went 3-10, and that was the first year I felt like we took a step back. We had been, And we made the ECAC tournament in our third year, which was pretty quick to make the tournament, especially for a conference that tough. That was a really tough conference at the time. Denver was in it, Loyola, Ohio State. So we made it in our third year, and then it was our fifth year that we took this step back. Now, a lot of reasons we took a step back. One of them was we lost Kyle Jackson and Ian King at the same time for most of the season, and that was literally 80% of our scoring gone at once. That we lost them in the same game. But was what it was. We felt like we took a step back, and Ward Manuel, who had become the AD at Michigan, and I've known Ward for almost 30 years now. We worked together in the department my first run. And we talked that summer quite a bit about, all right, where's the program? What are you doing? What do we need to do? And ultimately, he said, let's see what happens this next year. And fortunately for me, I got to leave with the sense that, we made some huge strides for the program that year. And that's what I came back. I was given the option to take a job in the athletic department or to keep coaching. And at that time, this was 2 years ago, and I said, I want to keep coaching, mostly because there's no way I wanted to end my run at Michigan on a 3-10 season feeling like we stepped back. And so we came back and we had an 8-6 year. We were ranked for our first time. We had an 8-1 start, which is still the best start the program's ever had. And I feel like we laid the foundation for where the program's going, which is back on track to where it's going to be.
It still had to hurt.
What hurt was not. There were many ways that I was kind of ready to leave. I was talking to a lot of people about stepping down behind the scenes, and even, the summer before, I told Ward that he'd never have to fire me, that I love the program too much. I'd step down and if I felt like I really needed to, and help them keep building it from a distance. What was disappointing was that they chose to do it the way that they did it, which is what it is. He's the boss. He can make the decision however he wants to make it. So. But I still am very supportive of the program. I don't get in their way. But I talk to, our world is small, right? So everybody who they considered for the new job would call me.
Right.
And, the department probably didn't want that happening, but they would call me and ask, pointed questions about what's the strength here, what's the weakness here, what do I need to be looking for? And I've known Kevin Connery a long time and have a ton of respect for him, and we talk regularly, and I wait for him to reach out, but if he needs something from me, he knows I'm here.
The university built a new facility.
Yeah.
Obviously, probably one of the best in the country.
The best, by far.
I mean,
it's not even a close second.
We are trying very hard with our organization for our Hall of Fame wall to be part of that process. Which I think is pretty terrific, because I think lots of people will be exposed to people that they might not otherwise know from that standpoint. You stayed away from lacrosse a little bit for a while. Was that intentional?
I didn't really stay. I stayed away from. I didn't. I stayed just involved enough, right, for me. So, that summer after my run at Michigan ended, I went out and did some tournaments with Juice Cherries with Jake Kenny and Derek Kenny, and just to get coaching a little bit. We went out east a couple times, and then I started a lacrosse consulting business that I've done a lot of work with Adrenaline and West Coast Stars. I've done a lot of international coaching, which I've been doing for 20 years. Talk a little bit
about Japan. You've been involved with Japan for
20 years. Yeah, 20 years.
And you were just recently there, if I'm not mistaken.
I was there twice this year. Yeah, and so Japan's been an amazing experience. I inherited that one from Ron Hebert, and Ron had been. I think Ron was introduced to the University of Tokyo lacrosse team by Dave Morrow, who had been over there setting up some sales streams for Warrior product. And Ron started coaching, going over. They would bring him over to help consult for their program. And at that time, college lacrosse in Japan was about 15 years old. And Ron was coaching at Northwood University at the time. And then he would host some of their players every spring. They would come over and live with his guys and practice for a few weeks, and then go back and take what they learned. When the Northwood program was cut, he couldn't host players anymore, so he asked me to start hosting players at Michigan, which we did gladly, which was an amazing experience. And then eventually he couldn't really keep going over to Japan, so I took over a couple years later going to Japan, and have been doing it ever since. And so I was going annually, sometimes twice a year for years. Once we became varsity, I didn't have as much time, so in those 6 years I probably only went 3 times. But then in the last year and a half since I've been coaching at that level. I've been over 3 times, and that University of Tokyo team is the second oldest in Japan. There's about 130 men's college teams there now. They're the second oldest behind KO, and they had a great year this year. They lost in the national championship game. They went undefeated, made it to the national championship game, and lost by a couple goals to Waseda.
2006 World Championships in London, Ontario. I had a chance to see them for the first time.
The Japanese national team.
Japanese national team.
Yeah.
And we were just starstruck how fast they were.
They're incredibly fast.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
I mean, they sometimes get knocked off the ball, but my God, were they fast?
Yeah, they're fast, and they play a very unique style.
Yeah.
And when you consider that there is virtually no youth or high school lacrosse in Japan, that'll start changing now.
Right.
But there really isn't. The sport's about 35 years old, and it's only in the colleges and post-collegiate club. So when I was there in, I guess, September, October, I was there this year during their season's in the fall. They had a 2-day training camp, basically, the University of Tokyo team that I work with. And we went to this remote site and stayed at this hotel and practiced 2 days for 2 days against the Falcons, which is a men's club team. And this men's club team is pretty much the national team. About 75% of the national team is on the Falcons. So Falcons win the men's club thing every year. And so we're playing them for 2 days, and I'm talking to a lot of the national team players, and the Falcons play the national team style, which is the fastest lacrosse in the history of the world. I mean, they are constantly moving, the ball's constantly moving, they're aggressive defensively, they ride aggressive, everything's just moving. And one of their players, one of the Falcons players, a national team player, was asking me, who do you compare us to in America? It's a Division I team. Are we like Albany? I said, no, there's nobody like you. I mean, this is, it's so unique how aggressive and fast you are. And he said, in the very Japanese way, he's like, yes, that is the Japanese way. So,
just goes full speed.
Yeah.
Well, that's good to watch.
Yeah.
You're now heading into a professional realm.
Yeah.
You were talking earlier about a club athlete versus an NCAA athlete. You're obviously now going to be with arguably the best 100, 150 players in the world. I guess, do you worry about that from an experience standpoint, or maybe it's the old joke is the farther up you go, the easier it is to coach.
Yeah, I'm not worried about that. This is certainly a new experience. It's really the only level I've never coached.
Right.
So
you gotta be excited.
I'm excited. I'm excited about the challenge. I'm excited about being around these guys. I'm excited about learning as much as I'm excited about coaching. But these guys want to be coached. I mean, that's what I keep hearing from them is they want the experience of being coached. They want this to feel like a professional lacrosse experience. So, that's the way we're going to approach this. Is we're going to try to put them in a position to win lacrosse games every week.
When I know the players that I do know that are playing professionally, like Scott Rogers, who's playing for the Ohio Machine, and he's making $12,000 a year. This is a very unique approach to professional lacrosse that hasn't been tried. Again, going back to sort of that traveling tent, if you will. Do you think it has a better chance of succeeding? Because I do. I really believe it has a chance of succeeding better because you're not stuck with a regional basis where you're only following a team of guys you don't know. You're seeing the best players in the country.
I don't know if it has a better chance or not. What I know is it's a very unique way of approaching pro sports that hasn't been tried before. It's basically, my wife is in the tech startup world, and that's what this is. I mean, so I see that all the time, and that's what these guys are doing. And the language is the same, the way they're approaching it is the same. The players get equity like you would in a startup. And the traveling part of it is because they don't want to overextend themselves too early, partly. They don't want to be in a lease situation where they're the rat-headed stepchild all the time in these stadiums. They don't want to get into stadiums until they own them. And this also gives them an opportunity to test markets and to see who's going to be the most supportive as they move forward as a league. I mean, they don't want to be this way forever. They've made that clear. They want to be. Well,
it's also not really a first process like this because if you go back to the 30s, there were barnstorming baseball teams.
You're right. Yeah, in that sense, yep.
When you had roughly 700 minor league teams, the House of David would be the perfect example. And I say the House of David because you had to have a beard to be able to play on the House of David.
Sure.
And that was, if you look at the 36 House of David team, it would have been an NL All-Star team at the time.
Yep.
And they went from town to town, and they got gate receipts. And they were making more money on their travel because you wanted to see this particular player or that particular player. And this is before the Negro Leagues were really challenging in the same kind of way. And I mean, again, we're going back 60 years. I just think that if you can get a chance to see that kind of lacrosse twice a year, and I happen to live in Poughkeepsie, I'm going. Where if I'm living in Columbus and I see the same team play over and over, it's not that I don't see good players, but it's just, I think it's like seeing a good play come to town. You want to go see it.
Agreed, and it's summer where everybody's distracted and has a lot of other things going on as well. But I do, you know, the level of play in this league is going to be off the charts. And
God, these are good players.
Yeah, I mean it's unbelievable. It's going to allow us as a league and as coaches to not only provide more of a professional experience for the players, but also hold them to a professional standard themselves, right? That maybe wasn't done so much, and I think that will help elevate the game. But you're right. If I'm in Boston and I have one weekend where this group is coming through to play 3 games, I'm going to try and get to that weekend.
My wife was a director of travel for a long time for the Pistons, and I used to go over. We lived across the street from the Palace, and when Larry Brown was there, I used to have a chance to go over and I would referee. I was a college and a high school referee, so I would go over and I'd have a chance to sit down and talk with Larry Brown, who I consider one of the best coaches around.
Yeah.
Minus his travel schedules, but you know, he used to talk about what being a professional coach was, and he said the only thing that they want from me is my experience to make them better. And the reason they listen to me is because they get better, and to them, getting better means more money. It's that selfish in the process. Now, if I can take all of that and then meld it into some culture, we have a world championship team, which is what he had. And if I can't provide them with getting better to make more money, to have better opportunities for them and their families, I get fired. It's really simple, and I think that the extent to this group is just exactly that. You got some Dom Starza, yourself. There's some names in this group that are some pretty darn good coaches.
No question. And the 6 of us are, you know, we were all together in New York a couple weeks ago, and we all know each other again. It's a small world, so we're all excited about the opportunity. This also, because of the way this is being run, we all work for the league, and we're all, you know, starting something together. We feel a little bit of, we're going to compete. We're all going to try and kick each other's ass every weekend, but we're all in this together too, and that's kind of special. That's very unique.
Is it coming to Detroit?
Can't tell you.
Okay. Oh, that's right. We talked about that. My mistake. Yep. You're right. I apologize. I shouldn't ask that question. Well, let me ask 2 final questions. What do you think of today's player? And the sort of, we have travel and we have high school, and we're starting to blur the lines.
Yeah.
You know, our travel teams decided they want to play in the spring, and
yeah,
I'm secretary of this coaching association, so part of that discussion is, I just wonder what your thoughts on travel, and then I'll ask my last question after you, maybe.
Well, you know, the sports in general, not just lacrosse, is all kind of morphed into this travel team, elite team model that,
because they're all going to get scholarships,
right? And which I don't think is healthy for anybody in the long run, but given the system and the way it is now, it's necessary. For a lot of people, it's necessary. So part of it is what it is, and I don't think we're going to be able to dramatically change that anytime soon. There are 2 things that I think we're missing the boat on right now. One is, you know, our sport has to do a good job providing opportunities for lower income kids, both to participate in our sport, continue to participate in it, or be introduced to it.
Absolutely.
Right? We're not good at that,
no.
And we need to be better at it. And so that's, and there are way more opportunities now than there were a few years ago. There's some people doing some incredible work along those lines right now, but we need more of that. So that's one area that we need to keep improving. And the other is, this whole trend in every sport is drawing kids away from being multi-sport athletes, which I hate, right? I think the opportunity to play multiple sports in high school has so many benefits, from a health perspective and a learning perspective and a non-burnout perspective and a competitive perspective, that to see people giving that up in the only opportunity in their lives they ever have to do it is sad to me. And I think while our sport keeps getting better, the athletes are getting bigger, faster, stronger, the stick skills are getting better and better, I think that experience is being lost, and I don't want to see it be lost.
History major,
yep, with
a fundraising background, they ended up coaching as a career. What's coaching meant to you?
It's just, I look at everything as, you know, in your relationships and the work you do, in the things you're able to do in your life, there's this path that is impossible to predict, right? And you ask almost anybody you know if they're doing exactly what they thought they'd be doing when they were 20 years old, and most people would say no, they had no idea they'd be doing what they're doing now. Lacrosse to me has given me this incredible opportunity to do so many things, travel so many places, but more than anything, to impact so many people. And you know, I've been able to coach hundreds of people, young people, and hopefully have some impact on what they're doing now in their lives and their path, whatever path that is, and the decisions they're making as they come to those forks in the road. And you know, there are a lot of careers that you can choose in your life where you don't have a direct opportunity to do that. I'm incredibly fortunate that I have.
Cool. Well, best of luck with PLL.
Thank you.
We appreciate all that you've meant to, certainly with Michigan lacrosse as a state and a university, to say the least, and you have a great holiday.
Thanks, you too, Greg.
Thanks for your time.